Hello and thank you for watching. I'm Kirstie Laatsch with the City of Madison Planning Division, and I'm going to provide an overview of the Imagine Madison public engagement process used in developing the city's comprehensive plan. So I will cover background information about structuring the engagement process, the three main techniques that we use to engage the public, and several other techniques that we also used. And then I'll close with a little bit about how we summarized and conveyed feedback. And along the way, I'll cover some different takeaways and key points. So to start with, I'm going to give a little background information. You might have heard of this process referred to as Imagine Madison. That's how we branded the process, but all of the feedback gathered through the Imagine Madison process was used to update the city's 2018 comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan, or comp plan as I might refer to it, is a document that translates community input and ideas into policies and actions that affect city budgets, ordinances, and growth. The plan looks years into the future and seeks opportunities to address long-term issues, but focuses on action steps to guide the city's near-term efforts. So as this graphic shows, the plan covers a wide range of topics, and many other city plans plug into this sort of umbrella plan of the comprehensive plan overall. This sort of shows how different pieces of the way that the city functions fit together. So the community input influence the comprehensive plan, and all these other pieces sort of work together in one process. So I should start by saying as well that this is not a typical city project. It's definitely a longer-term project for the city, and the mayor and the common council provided a significant budget for this project. So it was an opportunity really to get feedback from all parts of the community. So we did significant outreach for the project. And just a couple of steps that we took before we actually began doing any of the public engagement. We created a draft public engagement plan, which really laid out our initial ideas for how we would engage the public. And then we presented to and got feedback from the Racial Equity and Social Justice Initiative, the RESJI core team. Then we used the RESJI comprehensive tool on the public engagement plan and made some adjustments, and then vetted the draft public engagement plan with local community engagement experts. So overall, our public engagement plan outlined 5 engagement principles that we tried to include throughout the process. We wanted to make the process inclusive, and this is the one of the principles that we probably emphasized the most. We tried to make the process as inclusive and equitable as possible. We also wanted to make the process relevant to folks, so we wanted to make it resonate with people and show why the comp plan issues are important. We wanted to make sure that the process was fully transparent, and we wanted to be able to have the process be flexible so that we could adjust the engagement techniques along the way. And lastly, we wanted the process to be fun, which, as a city, that can be one of the big challenges, is making projects like this fun. So really quickly here, this is just a timeline of the process. We tried to compress the schedule for this project as much as possible to keep people involved throughout the whole process. And we created this timeline graphic to describe what each phase of the process would cover, since it was 18-month to 2-year process. So the timeline showed what we would cover and included questions that we'd be asking the community along the way. So that's just a little bit of background information. Now I'm going to talk for a while about the 3 main engagement techniques that we used to get feedback from the public. So the main engagement techniques were the community meetings, our interactive website, and the resident panel program. So starting with the community meetings, we held several community meetings in each phase of this process, and we really focused on removing barriers to participation to make the community meetings more equitable. So we made sure that we had a geographic distribution of meetings. We held the meetings in different parts of the city. We tried to choose locations that were accessible via public transportation. We always provided Spanish and Hmong interpreters. We always provided childcare for free. We always provided food from a local business, and we tried to hold the meetings on different days of the week to accommodate varying schedules. And overall, we tried to minimize staff presentations, keep them as short as possible, and make the community meetings as interactive as possible. So one thing that we did to make them more interactive was we use these handheld clickers. So they're essentially like handheld polling devices. As you can see, there's an image there on the screen. So you can get real-time feedback from the audience. So we would ask questions and have the audience answer them, and we would show the results in real time. And if you want to use the eye clickers, you can just contact me. We're able to loan them out to other city departments, and they're pretty easy to use. So just feel free to contact me. The next main technique that we used to engage the public was our website. So we provided remote participants with similar opportunities to participate as in-person participants at the community meetings. We tried to replicate as best as possible essentially the same feedback activities as the community meetings. And we designed the website activities to be as simple as possible and accessible for folks that had little to no exposure to planning principles previously. And it was really important that folks could provide just a little bit of feedback or as much as they wanted to. They could spend 5 minutes or 30 minutes giving feedback. So we put a lot of time and effort into making this website interactive. We selected a website company through an RFP process. And another thing that I wanted to mention is we had landing pages in both Spanish and Hmong with all of the core project information that was translated there. And I should also note that one thing that we made sure of was that we had our materials prepared well in advance, because it does take time to get things translated. So the next technique that I'm going to talk about is the resident panel program. This was one of the first times that this technique has been used at the city, and the objective was really to reach and deeply engage with historically underrepresented residents, people of color, youth, those living with lower incomes, and others. And the selected community organizations receive funding to serve as our liaisons to reach residents that they already have connections with. So each organization convened panels of approximately 10 to 15 residents to provide feedback at each phase of the Imagine Madison process. And the funding ranged anywhere from $2,500 to $8,000 per organization, and it really depended on how many panels they convened or what their needs were specifically. But in total, we budgeted approximately $70,000 for this engagement program. And the funding could be used for a number of things. It could be used towards the facilitators preparing for the resident panel meetings and to remove barriers and compensate the resident panel participants. So it could cover the cost of childcare, transportation, food, facility rental, gift cards for participants, and so on. And then at each phase, the planning division staff would hold an orientation meeting with the resident panel facilitators to cover background information on key concepts, provide them with suggested activities and materials, and we most often use the same materials as the community meetings. And then the organizations would hold the meetings with their participants, and they would report back to us with the feedback results. In total, we funded 12 partnerships for a total of 17 resident panels. Some of the organizations had more than one panel. Here's a list of the participating organizations. And one of the things I wanted to mention was that we wanted to encourage partnerships and make sure that we could reach different grassroots groups, which was really important to the success of this program. And it was also really key that we worked with the finance department and the city's attorney's office to simplify the application and contracting process, since we were hoping to contract with a wide variety of organizations, and in some cases individuals or small organizations that are just not as equipped to apply via a more formal RFP process. So we didn't even call this an RFP, actually. Instead we called it a call for community partners, a little bit more informal, and we did everything we could to make the application and the contracting process as simple as possible. So now I'm going to describe, many of the other engagement techniques that we used. Those were the main three, but we did a lot of other things to reach the public as well. So I'm going to cover these a bit quicker in less detail. First, we did what we called planning pop-ins. So basically, planning staff would attend existing events and meetings throughout the city rather than scheduling new meetings. We would, go to an organization's monthly meeting or a lunch and learn. For example, we went to Latino Support Network, or LaSoup, Downtown Madison Inc., Madison Network of Black Professionals, UW Earth Day, neighborhood associations, and so on. So we would go to these existing meetings and talk about the Imagine Madison project. Another thing we did was attend different summer festivals and farmers markets. So we would set up booths at summer festivals and events across the city. And we used an interactive activities, you can sort of see in the photos here, to have Madisonians answer a question by writing feedback on a whiteboard, and then we would take a photo of the folks holding their whiteboard with a Polaroid camera and then pin it up on a display board for others to read. So this was like an interactive activity that, that got people interested. And again, this was, really a great technique to meet people where they are and spread awareness and get feedback through existing events. Rather than trying to create brand new events, we could just show up at already scheduled events to meet people where they are, which was really key for this process. So we also held what we called a community discussion event. So this event was designed based on feedback from resident panels who expressed that they needed more time for larger group discussion about the topics, especially with participants from other organizations. So we invited the resident panel participants and community groups who applied for the resident panel program, but we weren't able to fund. And we had an open house, and we had small group discussions around topics chosen by participants, as well as an interactive art activity with a local artist. So attendees could provide feedback about Madison's future in a new way, which we hadn't done before, through simple illustration, which was really neat. And so next I want to talk about the Hip Hop Architecture Camp. So we partnered with several others to sponsor this Hip Hop Architecture Camp, and it had two main objectives. The first was to use the lens of hip hop, lyrics, and culture, along with the components of the Imagine Madison process to, really to guide underrepresented youth in thinking about the impact that they can have on the communities they live in. And another goal was to, get underrepresented youth interested in architecture and planning careers. So this was a really cool event that we partnered with. And if you haven't heard of it, the Hip Hop Architecture Camp, you should Google it and check it out. It was really neat. And since it's been expanded across the country and received lots of international attention, so I would encourage you to check that out. The next technique that I wanted to talk about was the student engagement that we did. So we engaged with students participating in the People program at 4 Madison high schools. We also talked with students in several courses at the UW, and as well as students involved in Associated Students of Madison at UW. And we got feedback from Madison College Student Senate several times throughout the process as well. And these methods really helped us to reach younger Madisonians. We were also on social media. We had a Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and through social media we shared videos, photos, events, and project updates. We also had email updates that we sent throughout the project. So we sent out email updates to stakeholders who signed up to receive project updates, shared project information, upcoming events, ways to engage online, and summaries of feedback. And what we really focused on making these email updates concise, kind of playful or informal. Another thing that we did was we went to the neighborhood resource teams. So the map shows, the different neighborhood resource teams if you're not familiar. But we went to each NRT to find out about the top priorities for each neighborhood. We asked what actions are you working on in the neighborhood? What actions are you considering? What things, what are the top priorities, and what would you like to see change? So we met with each of the NRTs to get that feedback. We also did a Cap Times talk event at the High Noon Saloon in Madison. So we partnered with the Cap Times for one of their Cap Times talk events. There was a panel discussion regarding how to build great neighborhoods in the growing city of Madison, and then after the panel, we used feedback activities similar to those from the community meetings in Phase 3 to get feedback from attendees. And this was really a unique engagement method that we hadn't done before, but it turned out to work pretty well. And just a couple of other miscellaneous things that I wanted to share here at the end. We had a small contract with a local marketing firm, and they helped us to develop the Imagine Madison branding, the logo, and the messaging for the process. And the marketing firm also pitched stories to media for us, so they connected us better with the press, and this overall helped us to spread awareness about the project. Another thing I wanted to mention was we tracked the demographics of participants as best we could throughout the process to monitor how the demographics matched with that of the city population as a whole. So we tracked race and ethnicity, area of residence, age, income, and gender. So I've just got a couple examples here on the slide. And we made adjustments to the engagement activities, as gaps in engagement were identified. So while some small gaps remained, of course, being aware of the gaps in engagement allowed us to understand who the public input really represented and which voices were absent from our feedback, which was really key for this process. And it was also important to keep the feedback separate by source. So we kept the feedback from the website, the community meetings, and the resident panels separated by source so that you could see what was important to each group. So we found that the demographics varied greatly by each of the three sources. So this graphic shows, on the far right here, the far right columns, it shows the three different sources, and we used color coding to show the level of support for each of the draft strategies by source. So you can see the difference in support. The darker colors represent high support for the strategy, and the lighter colors represent lower support for the strategy per engagement source. So because the resident panels were made up of historically underrepresented residents, we emphasized the resident panel feedback to the city boards and commissions and committees throughout this whole process. And we also emphasized it as well in the feedback summary reports when we conveyed the feedback to the public. So again, it was really important that we kept this feedback separate by source to highlight the differences and emphasize what the resident panels were saying overall. And I just wanted to sort of show how we conveyed this feedback. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions or if you want any other details about this engagement process. And thank you for watching.